Hi everybody, welcome to our tutorial on model building. Before we get started with the actual construction of the model, I want to go over just some materials and tools that you will want to have in order to be able to successfully complete this project. Some of these are more required than others. I'll let you know as we go through the things that I think you really do need to have versus the things that you just might want to have depending on what you're trying to do in your model. So we'll go ahead and get started with cutting tools. This is something that I really do very much recommend, if not require, that you get, and that is a good craft knife. They're sometimes referred to as an X-Acto knife. That's the brand. And you'll want to get some extra blades with these as well. The number 11 blades are the blades that you want to get. So to change the blades on these, you just unscrew the top here and the blade comes out. And then you can put this back in, change the blade, screw it back on nice and tight, right? So these are very sharp. Please be careful when you use them. And when you are done with the blade, or when your blade gets dull, make sure that you dispose of your blade properly. Don't just throw it in the trash, wrap it up in masking tape, stick it in a piece of cardboard sleeve kind of thing. Something so that somebody, doesn't pick up your trash and then cut themselves on a razor blade. You can get packs of like 15 blades. That will probably be enough for what you're doing with this project. But you do want to make sure you have enough blades. Once these get dull, they just don't cut very well and you'll be fighting them. So don't fight the blades. You also could have a pair of scissors. Scissors don't work great for cutting things like foam core and cardboard, but they're great for things like paper. So you can probably get by with just the X-Acto knife, but if you do have a pair of scissors, you might find those helpful as well. You will want to have a straight edge, and I prefer a metal straight edge because then when you're using it to cut, a straight line, you don't necessarily run the risk of cutting into the straight edge and making it a not straight edge. But if you have a plastic one, just be careful when you're cutting. Just a regular ruler is fine. Doesn't need to be a scale ruler. If you have a scale ruler and want to use it for this project, if you know how to use a scale ruler, that's great. Use it, go ahead. If you don't, just work towards proportion. So use the size of the proscenium and the stage that I've given you, and just try and make everything look proportional as opposed to worrying too much about it being in an exact scale. I'm not going to see your models in person anyway, so as long as the proportions look right in a photograph, you'll be fine. If you have, again, a 90-degree triangle, there are places where having a nice square corner can be really helpful, but if you don't have one of these, just a good square corner of a book can also work just as well. Adhesives. Glue of some sort. You will need glue, right? I like tacky glue because it sets up faster and you don't spend as much time sort of holding things together and waiting for glue to dry, but regular old school glue is also fine. I like to have a glue stick with me. There are things that glue sticks work better than regular glue for, so if you have a glue stick, that's also helpful. You can also use a hot glue gun or any other kind of adhesive that you like. Tape is also fine. The one thing I do ask is if you do tape things together, please think about how you're using tape in your model so that you're not putting it in places where it's distracting from the overall design. So don't wrap things in tape to hold them together if it's something we're going to see on the stage. Okay, and then you might want to have some other things, just kind of, again, depending on what you're trying to do. So, you're going to need to put this in color, so you'll need paint, markers, colored pencils, something to do color media, possibly colored paper as well. If you have scrapbook paper, scrapbook paper is sometimes a really useful thing. You can print images off and use those to create color and texture in your model as well. I don't recommend using crayons. They're just a little too clunky. You don't get as good of a finish with a crayon. So, but any other kind of color media is fine. I wouldn't recommend oil paint just because it's messy and takes forever to dry, but if that's what you have and that's what you want, go for it. So anyway, so those are the basic tools that you will need. And so then we're going to move on into the materials that you'll want to have. So you will need either foam board or corrugated cardboard, and I don't really care which of those you use. Foam board, if you've never used it before, is basically a layer of foam with a paper covering on both sides. You can get it at any hobby store, craft store. Actually, you can even get like display boards at Walmart. The dollar store actually does carry foam core. You can get it in different thicknesses. So this one's a little thinner, this one's a little thicker, this one's a little thicker yet. If you buy just this sort of cheap stuff at or at Walmart or dollar store, it'll usually be the thicker stuff. The thinner stuff you pretty much have to get at a craft supply store. But foam board is one option. The other option is just plain old corrugated cardboard, like a cardboard box, right? So if you've been ordering lots of things online during the pandemic, you should have a good supply of cardboard. And if you don't, somebody else has been, and you can go dumpster dive somebody else's cardboard. The nice thing about cardboard, it's free. So just try and find something that's got a relatively clean side to it, or else be prepared to paint over it. And, you know, not just use you don't want to use this as like the front of your model. So the other thing you'll want to have in terms of major materials is some kind of sort of medium weight substance. So either cardstock, which is just heavy paper, sometimes called cover stock, or some kind of thin cardboard like what you get on a cereal box or, you know, dumpling box. It's not corrugated, it's just the one layer of cardboard. You can also buy chipboard at the bookstore that works also. You can get that in different thicknesses. But just something so that you can cut a little bit finer details into this. Cutting small details into thick foam core does not work well. So you'll want something that you can use for a little more detail. You might also want to have, if you have craft supplies, then you can just go through your craft supplies. But I find things like beads, little jewelry finding things. They're called jewelry findings. I don't know why, probably just because you go through the store and find them. I don't actually know what this is for. I'm assuming it's to sort of hold a little bead like on a necklace or an earring or something. If you can see that. I think I originally bought these because I was making a bird bath for a model, and so I wanted a little basin. But you can think of, you know, stuff like this. If I hold it this way, it's a little basin, but it could also be a light fixture. I could put a bead in it, and now it looks a little more like a lamp, right? So there's all kinds of this stuff available. Sometimes I just wander through craft stores and see what sort of sparks my interest. But again, not something that you're required to have, just if you're sort of trying to figure out how to do something. Sometimes just wandering through the craft store and looking at their random things is a useful way to go. So that's kind of it. Oh, one last thing. Basswood or balsa wood. I prefer basswood. It's a little bit harder. Balsa wood is really soft and tends to kind of squish when you cut it. But you can get basswood or balsa wood in a variety of different thicknesses and different shapes. So there's like planks of it. It usually comes in these long strips. This one's kind of a small square. This one's a slightly larger square. You can get some that are more like, they look kind of like 2x4 actually. Just really, really tiny 2x4, but they're kind of long and flat and skinny. You can get dowel, right? So round ones. Again, any craft store, hobby store, the Student Union bookstore has lots of this kind of stuff. It can be really useful, again, just sort of depending on what you're trying to do, but not required. You will also want to print off a copy of the ground plan for the theater space. Normally I just print these off and give them to you on 11x17 paper, but since I don't get to actually see you in person, I have made them so that they're printable in sort of half of the theater at a time. Right, so there's stage left and there's stage right, and you print off one of each and you cut them along the center line and you put them together and you have the entire theater ground plan. So you will want to print off a copy of this, and also on there On Canvas, there is a series of pages that look kind of like this. These are from the Architectural Graphic Standards book from 1938 or something like that. They have nice traditional furniture. The great thing about these is if you print them off at full scale, they end up being in 1/4 inch scale. So in another couple of videos, I'm actually going to show you how to take these and make actual 3-dimensional furniture out of using these printed pieces of furniture. So that should be it for the tools and materials that you will need, and I will be back in a little bit with a section on how to build the model shell.